Studios in Abuja and Maupe Ogun Yusuf. President Tinubu's tax reform bills have caused quite a storm, which are yet to quiet down. Last week, the National Economic Council had advised that the president withdraw the bills from the National Assembly to allow for more consultation. The admonition came on the back of the withdrawal of support by northern governors for the bills, saying the reforms, especially around VAT, were disadvantageous to less industrialized regions. Well, the president seems adamant on a non-withdrawal of the bill from the National Assembly. His spokesperson, Mr. Bayo Onanuga, released a statement which thanked the National Economic Council for the advice, but emphasized that his preference would be to let the bill go through the legislative process, which he says has already begun. It's unclear how the bills will fare in the two chambers of the National Assembly, as responses from members have been varied. Just on Tuesday, a senator from Borno State declared that the president's tax reform bills will be dead on arrival in the Red Chamber. Now, before you take sides, either for or against the tax reform bills, let's take a look at what has been presented before the National Assembly. The bill has at least 4 parts to it. They include the Nigeria Tax Bill, the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill, which will repeal the Federal Inland Revenue Service and establish a new agency called the Nigeria Revenue Service, and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill, which will replace the Joint Tax Board. On hard copy tonight, I speak with Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who heads the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms. The work of this committee has given birth to the bills now before the National Assembly. Mr. Oyedele, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be on Hard Copy.
Yeah, yes, Hard Copy. Well, we'll try and keep it hard.
Yes.
And tax, as you know, is a very hard matter.
It's hard naturally.
Yes. People do not like to pay taxes.
Absolutely.
Or at least when they do, they want their taxes to be working well for them.
Indeed, and that's to be expected.
So let me first of all ask you, because I get a bit confused. When I hear the tax reform bill, I imagine there was one bill, but upon closer inspection, it does appear that they're a body of bills. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it would be wrong to say tax reform bill. It would be tax reform bills.
Yes, it will be bills.
Yeah.
So there are 4 bills, but in fact, one of that, the Nigeria Tax Bill, is also a bill that has now harmonized about 7-8 different tax laws.
7-8 different tax laws.
Yes, Companies Income Tax Act, Petroleum Profit Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Capital Gains Tax Act, Stamp Duties Act, because we feel like, why should it be so complicated to find out my tax obligations? Why don't you pull all of that together in one piece of legislation and find commonality? So when should I pay the tax? Who should I pay to? In what currency should I pay? Why do you repeat it in 7 places when you can write it once, use simple language that people can understand? It's already hard to pay tax. It shouldn't be harder trying to find out how much you pay. So while there are 4 bills, you could actually say, in principle, maybe there are about 12, 15 bills that will compress into 4.
Okay, so 4 bills.
Yes.
The first one, which I read, the Nigeria Tax Bill, has to do with personal income tax and companies tax.
Yes, and VAT
And
stamp duties and capital gains tax.
Oh, there's VAT in the first one as well.
VAT
I thought VAT was in the Joint Tax Board one.
No.
Okay.
So we have the VAT in the Nigeria. So the Nigerian Tax Bill is actually the bill that has Nigerian taxes. That's why we call it the Nigerian Tax Bill. So it's the one that has the value-added tax, companies income tax, personal income tax, capital gains tax, excise duty tax, and a few other taxes here and there. But what we did was to focus on the major taxes, because our plan is that all the other nuisance taxes should be repealed, and there are over 50 of them. As a country, why don't we just focus on a few taxes that are broad-based, high revenue yielding, easy to collect, hard to evade? Get rid of taxes that are low revenue yielding, place significant amount of burden on small businesses and vulnerable people. Like you're collecting bicycle tax, wheelbarrow tax, haulage taxes. Those taxes don't yield a lot to the government, but people actually pay a lot, which means there's significant leakages in the process. And because you have leakages and corruption, your chances of getting services, fiscal exchange from the taxes you pay is near zero. So you bear the pain without any benefit. So our hope is that when we are done with our reforms, all the taxes will be down to a single digit.
Okay, so tell us more. The Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, you've spoken about the Nigeria Tax Bill, which is like the major one, so to speak. What is the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill about? So
the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill is our attempt to try and put everything to do with tax administration, registration of taxpayers, filing of returns, assessment, doing tax audit, enforcement, using technology for tax administration. And we also we thought, why don't you expand that scope to cover revenue administration across Nigeria? So what should a state tax authority look like in terms of qualification, competencies, capacity, use of resources? How do you fund them? We also have that covered. I'll give you an example. If you were late in paying your VAT, and I'm late in paying my company's income tax, our penalties are different. The interest you pay. So I say, what's the point? The reason why you asked me to pay a penalty and interest is because I've denied government the use of the fund. So maybe they had to borrow. So you make me pay. Why are the conditions and requirements different from one tax to another? So we've pulled all of this together under the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, which is essentially how we administer taxes in Nigeria.
Okay, and then you have you're repealing the FIRS. Why is that?
Yes, because think about it. We say Federal Inland Revenue Service. It presupposes that it is the tax agency of the federal government. But look at all the taxes they collect. Companies, income tax, value-added tax, they're shared by the federation. So actually, the FIRS is not the revenue agency of the federal government. It is the revenue agency of the federation. So we thought an appropriate name would be Nigeria Revenue Service. We played around with Federation Revenue Service. It was looking too complicated. So that's number one. Number two is today, we have over 60 agencies of government at the federal level. And of course, a lot more than that if you put all the states together, collecting taxes and levies. We do not know of any country where that is the case, whether it's in Africa or outside of Africa. So why don't you allow one agency collect taxes and levies so that government agencies will focus on their primary mandates? If you are a regulator, regulate the sector. Don't collect taxes. You were not set up to collect taxes, which means you do not have the capacity to collect taxes.
Such as what? What regulatory bodies are you looking at removing the powers of collecting taxes from their hands?
Yeah, so if you think about the Nigeria Upstream Regulatory Commission, they collect royalty from oil companies. Royalty is a tax. So what they should do is regulate upstream activities, not collecting taxes. Even Nigerian Customs Service, they collect revenue relating to import duties, VAT at the ports, but they should focus on trade facilitation and border protection. So that's why you see HMRC in the UK collect, even Social Security is collected by the Revenue Authority in the UK. South African Revenue Service collects everything. Ghana Revenue Authority collects everything. Kenya Revenue Authority, even in Africa. The advantage is when you put everything together in one place, you're able to build capacity. You're able to use information and intelligence. Today, if I import an item, I have a selfish interest in under declaring the value, not to pay the right amount of duties, right? So I under declare, so I pay lower duties. When I'm submitting my returns to the FRS, I want to overstate it so I could get tax deductions, so I don't pay a lot of companies' income tax. And there are companies doing that today in Nigeria and getting away with it. This is something that should not happen in 2024. So we want to be able to connect the intelligence together, let the authorities that have been trained on tax matters collect taxes, let the rest of us focus on getting our jobs done in terms of our primary mandate and watch the economy grow in a way that benefits everyone.
In a climb such as ours, you didn't think that this was going to be an easy job?
Of course, I knew from day one it was going to be a tough job. I think if it's easy, then you're not reforming anything. Because when you do reforms, you're going to step on interest. You're going to change things. People don't like change because it's uncertain. They don't know what's going to come. But we can also pretend like everything is fine and continue with the status quo. And we know it's not going to lead us to, I don't want to say where it's going to lead us to, but we can give examples of countries in the world where the outcome is not what we want. So we don't pray for those things for our country. If you had 1,000 naira about 2 years ago, and you have 1,000 naira today, your 1,000 naira today is barely up to half of what it was 2 years ago. When we printed about 40 trillion naira, what we did without increasing the output in the economy, we reduced the value of the naira you had in your bank account and in your wallet proportionately by the amount of money we had printed. It's a way of collecting taxes without legislation. Unfortunately, that method of collecting taxes impacts on the most vulnerable more than people who have assets that can protect the value of inflation. That's not the society we want. So we're saying, why don't we have an orderly restructuring of the system so you can protect the poorest people, small businesses, and those of us who are not so poor can then pay a little bit more. And then we follow the money to ensure that the money is used for the purpose of the people. That's really what these reforms are all about.
Let me bring you to what has now happened as a result of the reforms. I'm sure you expected some pushback, but perhaps not from the quarters that you have now heard it from.
Absolutely.
Last week, the governors were up in arms, especially northern governors, and eventually escalated to the larger body of the House when it went to the National Economic Council meeting, asking the president to withdraw the bill from the bills from the National Assembly. And will I say the biggest bone of contention for them have been the VAT. Tell us, does VAT put less industrialized regions at a disadvantage?
The answer is no, and you're spot on, Mark. While we're working on this, we thought that we'll be celebrated by like northern states, even though for us it wasn't a regional conversation. We thought that all the states will celebrate us and say, thank you for doing this for us. And we thought we were going to have a very difficult time explaining to Lagos State.
You were actually expecting a celebration.
We were expecting that we'll be celebrated. So we went to the governor of Lagos State because we thought that was going to be the difficult conversation. Went to the governor of Lagos State, and he was very supportive and said, you know, why don't we set up a committee of my cabinet and some of your members to walk through these details? We're having our engagement for more than 6 months. Okay, let me explain what the issue is. I'll do a bit of, backtracking to history. In 1986, the military introduced a decree on sales tax, and it was to be collected by states. 5 years, they were not making progress. In 1991, the military set up a committee to say, why is this sales tax not working? Maybe we should consider VAT. Value-added tax. So the committee did their work, and by 1993, the conclusion was VAT will be a better tax to collect because, one, it does not create inflation, because sales tax creates inflation because anytime you pay it, you can't recover it. Whereas VAT, you can recover it as you add value. Number two, it allows commerce between states and also with international. And then they said, if we must collect this VAT, we should collect it centrally because that's the most efficient way of collecting it. So it's a state tax, collect it centrally and give it back to the state. Take your money for administering it, investing in capacity. That's how we ended up with the federal government sharing 15%, states 50%, local government 35%. This happened in 1993 was when the decree was promulgated. The law implementation started in 1994. Now, by 1999, we were writing the Constitution because we now have the Fourth Republic. But what we did was just replicate the 1979 Constitution. Why is this story important? In 1979, there was no VAT. So there was no VAT in the 1979 Constitution. By 1999, we had implemented VAT for about 5 years, and it was becoming a top revenue earning tax. How on earth did we forget to put it in the 1999 Constitution? Because it wasn't stated in the 1999 Constitution, lawyers will say to you that it's a residual matter. Because it's a residual matter means it's a matter for subnational. That is why Rivers State, Lagos State have been to court and they have won. If we get a judgment from the Supreme Court today, it will tell you that VAT should be collected and administered by state. That would be chaotic. That will be taking us back to 1986. State will collect less, business will suffer, the economy would retrogress. We don't want that.
The idea behind the solution that had come was because they were trying to resolve a problem, and that's why companies just resorted to filing the... So what was the innovation which you had introduced in this new tax reform bill, which governors or, quite a number of people do not seem to understand yet?
Yeah, great question. All the banks, almost all of them are headquartered in Lagos. They pay the VAT in Lagos. Beverage companies, Nigeria Breweries, Coca-Cola, they sell beverages across Nigeria, but they file in Lagos. You know what we do currently? That's VAT that is remitted in Lagos is attributed to Lagos as being derived from Lagos. But it's not derived from Lagos. When you make calls, it's derived from across Nigeria. Which was why we thought that the hard conversation we're going to have was convincing Lagos State that this is our new method that says move away from where VAT is remitted to where the consumption takes place. Every state in Nigeria would use mobile phone. They will use airtime. They will buy soft drinks. They will use cement. They're building houses everywhere. Dangote will remit the VAT in Lagos. So we said, let's correct these distorted derivations so it reflects economic activities everywhere those activities take place for the purpose of sharing.
Sorry to interrupt you, but how are you hoping to correct that without going back to the old complicated system?
So in 1990 something, companies were filing returns everywhere, right? Then in 2024, we say file it in one place, right? That's what we've done for some years. Those companies within their system can tell you where the transactions are taking place. MTN will tell you where the subscribers are based, right? If you are Coca-Cola, and it can be any company, I don't want to call any particular company's name, you have distributors and they have addresses. In 5 minutes, you can tell you where their distributors are based and how much goods they've sent to them. So rather than saying because the company producing the beverages is headquartered in Lagos, that's where we derive all the stuff from in Nigeria, we'll say, where did you send them to? The one you sent to Ekiti, to Zamfara, to Kebbi, to Abia. Let them take credit for their economic activities, right? And I think everybody should be excited about that. Apart from Lagos State, honestly, we think it's only Lagos State that should not like what we're proposing.
Not even Rivers?
Rivers has mostly the oil companies headquartered there. The story about Rivers is that what the oil companies sell is VAT exempt. So they don't have a lot of VAT in that sense that will be attributed to them. Apart from the fact that when the oil companies receive invoices by law, they are meant to retain the VAT. That's what they are remitting that is giving Rivers State the attribution that they have today, right? So on balance, this was meant to treat everybody equitably, trying to get us out of the impression that when you start doing VAT at state level, you make so much money, which is not the case. In fact, today, the VAT on imports and international services is actually more than the VAT we collect in Nigeria within our jurisdiction. So, and that amount that is collected from international services and import VAT is not attributed to any state. It goes into the pool and is shared. So we share today VAT between and among states based on derivation, 20%, based on equality, 50%, and based on population, 30%. We are proposing that correct the derivation and share 60% based on derivation, 20% based on population, and 20% based on equality. Let me tell you the even more attractive proposition that we have. we thought was going to be very difficult was, their federal government, can you please cede 5% of your share to the state? Instead of taking 15%, why don't you take 10%? Now we have 5% that can give us a buffer that we can use to do fiscal equalization, and actually write in the law to guarantee every state that as a result of our reform, you will not collect less than you would have collected under the old formula. I thought that should be good enough. It's actually just saying to you at a state that your risk is zero, but the upside is significant. Your VAT revenue can double in less than 2 years if they allow this reform to go through. Because it would also motivate states to take interest in the economic activities within their jurisdiction.
I imagine that you've had a moment to engage with the governors on this. How has it yielded any fruit since the NEC asked for the withdrawal of the bill?
Yes, so I was at the NEC meeting where they asked for the withdrawal of the bill. Before then, we've had engagements with the Governors Forum. We had with the finance commissioners. We've had series of engagement with the Joint Task Board, where you have the head of the revenue services across Nigeria, among other engagements. I'll say we are making progress. I do think that the misunderstanding was based on people not reading all the provisions of the law, because where we're trying to correct how this derivation is done is in the tax administration bill, whereas the VAT law is in the Nigerian tax bill. So somebody picked one leg of it, didn't find the second one, and then they concluded that this was going to be against the North. This is not against the North. It's not against any region. This is to benefit everybody.
Let me ask you this, because I heard you say when you're explaining the Nigeria Revenue Service, because you said that the impression that the Federal Inland Revenue Service gives is that it's the federal government agency. But what you envisage, or what ideally it is that it's for the federation.
Correct.
Are you seeing a situation whereby states will no longer be collecting taxes? Would they be relevant in the scheme of things?
No, states would always have to collect their own taxes. What we've done is, in the bills we've proposed, we've put a framework there to allow more cooperation between tax authorities. It can be one state to another state. It can be between the center to a state. It can be state to a local government. But we think that working together, particularly in terms of data and tax intelligence and capacity building, is going to transform the system. Today, I can tell you that, I'm not resident in Abuja, I'm resident in Lagos. Lagos will ask me, I say, well, don't you know that I work mostly in Abuja? I can play the tax authorities against themselves and not pay the right amount of tax. So what we envisage with the Nigerian Revenue Service is, first, at the federal government level, they collect levies and taxes. They continue to collect the federation taxes that they collect now. And then even at some point, they're able to connect with the custom service, so that even though custom will physically be administering the taxes, but it flows into a unified system. And then the NRS links up with all the internal revenue services across Nigeria. Whatever you do in Abia, whatever you do in Kogi reflects on the system. And that helps us a lot, not only with collecting taxes, but having reliable data for economic planning, which is important.
But it's unclear how this is going to fare in the National Assembly. Are you already engaging with legislators? How do you think that this will fare in the National Assembly?
Yes, we are engaging with the legislators. We are convinced that our lawmakers, our governors, they all want the best for Nigeria. They just have concerns. And we think that those concerns can be addressed as we go through the process. Like, if you withdraw the bill, the process of getting the bill to the National Assembly will at least another 6 months. We don't have that luxury of time. This bill is trying to provide exemption to poor people, low-income earners, exempting small businesses. It's trying to improve, even reducing the company income tax rate for large firms so that they can invest more. We have a lot of things to do with how we ensure that we stimulate economic activities, including export. There's just so much at stake. We cannot afford to withdraw this. What we are being asked to do, to be honest, we'll drop the proposal around the new formula and use the old one. We just need to then pray and hope that no states will go to Supreme Court and scatter everything. But in the engagement we are having so far with the lawmakers, once we're able to explain, everybody says, why is anybody trying to scuttle this? Interestingly, the senator that spoke on your sister program, Wishen Okinbaloye, admitted that he has not read the bill. So we believe that we don't expect all of them to read bills of 200, 300 pages. We will summarize for them. We're also trying to explain to their people, head of the Internal Revenue Service, so those people can explain to them. Maybe they will trust them more than they trust us. Mr.
So you
President,
think trust is also a problem?
I think trust is indeed a problem there. It's a big problem there. Mr. President never asked us for not even one request to say, when you're done with your reform, ensure there's this there. Have to give that credit to him. Unfortunately, as a leader, he has to bear the brunt of the blaming it on him to say, wow, you want to make us weak, not than governors. That is far from the intention. And we think that the solution to the concerns that they have is simple and we can get it done together.
But if it doesn't work?
I do not want to envisage an option of it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, that would be a big shame for our country. I don't know whether it will happen again in my lifetime where you have this level of commitment from the highest level for a holistic reform. I've done all my career in Nigeria. Nigeria's tax system is one of the most backward in the world. It's embarrassing. We had laws we inherited from our colonial masters. The stamp duty law is a law of 1939. We're in 2024. Anything that stops the process of trying to reform that will be really, really sad. So I don't want to envisage that option. I think we can work out the differences for the process to continue and for the bills to be enacted.
Well, Mr. Taiwo, we certainly will be catching up with you because we know that this conversation is far from over. We can only wish you the best as we wish our country well. I know that you're, I don't know what I should be wishing you well because it looks like I'm going to be paying more tax. But hey.
No, you're going to pay less tax. Only the richest people will pay more tax.
If you say so. Yes. They're also watching you. Don't forget that they also have stakes. But we have to